Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the IdOMUSIC podcast, and our goal and our mission is to empower and educate musicians and artists worldwide. And on today's episode, we sat down with Think It's a Game General Manager and Music Executive Kim Smith-Dockery discussing starting at Teddy Riley's Future Recording Studios, going from studying electrical engineering to becoming a music engineer, and how she sustained for 25 plus years in this business. Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the IdOMUSIC podcast, and today I'm sitting down with TIG's general manager and music executive over 25 plus years in the game. Shout out to Kim Dockery. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for asking. We were talking about it off the record, just of like how we enjoy or how often we don't hear the stories of people behind the scenes, and that's what this podcast is for. So we really want to get into your story and like just how you've been able to wear a number of hats over the years. You've been able to sustain yourself throughout the business, the changes, and I'm just really interested to get into that. So Virginia, VA,
Yep.
to Atlanta at
VA.
this point, which is like your second home, I'm sure. You've been here for a minute. Yes. Can you tell me, first off, I discovered that you went to school for electrical engineering
I
at Norfolk
did.
State. Or
Yeah.
Norfolk. Is that how you say
Yeah.
it?
No. Yep.
Norfolk. Yeah, no,
Norfolk.
y'all pronounce it a little different.
Yeah.
So you went to school for electrical engineering, but somehow you ended up being a music engineer at some point too, right?
I did, which was, I feel like I was destined to work in the music industry. And I mean, I was a New Edition fanatic. So
Yeah.
all the New Edition shows, I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Run DMC, LL Cool J, every show that came to town, I was there. And by working in that drive-through, all the artists would come through the drive-through. I ended up getting backstage passes,
Really?
which I feel like, that was fate.
Yeah.
Because
sure.
none of my friends were getting passes to go to shows. So back then, I met a lady named Nichelle Stevens. But this lady, Nichelle Stevens, was working with Run DMC. And she asked if I wanted to meet Run DMC. Met Run DMC. I said my rap. And so every time they would come back to town, they would say, "Oh, she's the cute little rapper." But then years later, I was working for Future, and I'll get back to that, Future Recording Studios. But I started managing an artist, and Jam Master Jay stayed in touch with me. And at the time, he had a deal for JMJ Records with Def Jam.
Mm-hmm.
And the artist that I managed, he gave me a deal for that artist.
Wow.
When I was given the agreement, I read through that contract and marked it up. I ended up meeting this attorney. At the time, she represented, I can't even think of the basketball player. There was some NBA player that she represented,
Mm-hmm.
and she agreed to represent me for free. But once she saw all of my notes for the agreement, she said, "Wow, you don't know anything about the entertainment industry, but you actually marked this agreement up the way an attorney would." I didn't know anything about the music industry.
Wow. Just naturally, what were you doing on the agreement? Like, what do you mean marking it up? Like,
Well, just making your
notes?
comment. Look, redlining the
Redlining.
agreement the way attorneys do now, and I had no idea what I was doing.
That's interesting.
And I mean, just to back up a little bit,
Mhm.
when I started managing that artist, I was already working at Future Recording Studios.
Right, Teddy Riley's studio.
Yep.
And this is in Virginia?
In Virginia Beach. And again, that was, it was destiny. It really was, because being an engineering student, I mean, I just didn't have any plans to work in the music industry. I didn't have, I don't know, I didn't have any type of strategy. I was just going to school.
Right. What made you decide to pursue electrical engineering you kind of spoke to it already. I was going to ask you, do you feel like this is ordained for your life just because of how things panned out in your journey specifically? But going into school, going into college, why'd you say, okay, let me just go electrical engineering route?
My dad, I'm the youngest of three, and he would always tell us, major in something technical. You got to major in science, math. I don't think I'm that good at math, and I didn't really like science, even though I liked physics a little bit in high school, but I wasn't good at it.
Right.
He kept saying, "You want to have a job, when you get out of
Stability.
school, stability, the safe job." That's not me. I mean, I like to, even though I'm kind of laid back and reserved, I like to have fun and
Right.
enjoy what I'm doing.
Right.
And I'm just grateful that I can say I work a job that I really enjoy
Yeah. Every day. That's awesome.
every day.
Because everybody can't say the same.
Right.
So, do you have children?
I have stepkids.
You have
I don't have
stepkids.
my own, which
Neither here nor there.
probably because I focus on work.
And we can get into that too, but I would, or what would you tell your stepkids or students or aspiring, artists, whoever are listening to this, in terms of like pursuing something that you love or like your passion over something that provides the stability?
Well, I always tell them, do something you love to do. I mean, I can't imagine working a job and just dreading waking up every morning. I mean, I love my job and I pretty much work 7 days a week. But now that I'm married, I force myself to take a break. Like
Yeah.
I'll say, okay, well, this weekend I'm not gonna pick
Answer
up the
my phone.
computer. I'm not gonna answer the phone. But I get calls all the time.
Same.
I might get a call or a text from Lucci like a couple weeks ago. He FaceTimed me at 2 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
but he was calling to book studio time. So
That's the life that we chose, But I want to get back to just the fact that you've been able to, you're versatile. Like you're not just, you haven't just done one thing over the years. Right now, you're general manager for TIG. Previously working with Teddy Riley's studio at Future Recording Studios. To talent and production manager, working with some big names. And I'm curious to know what you did for like Michael Jackson, Patti LaBelle, Rolling Stones. There was a bunch of names on there. I was like, this is so far in between, from acts, but all very legendary names and people who have a lot of the business acumen that you have adopted at this point. So I'm curious, and it's super cool to know that you started with those type of people, and it's like that was just your trajectory. And I don't know what you believe, but like that's what got ordained probably for your life. So how have you been able to sustain, and how did you link up with some of these people over the years? Obviously, starting with someone like a Teddy Riley in his studio, I'm sure it kind of kickstarted that.
yeah, well, for the artists that you mentioned, I worked with them through Teddy.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, Teddy Riley was hot, hot, hot.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, let me back up. I got the internship
While you were in school.
while I was in school, and Teddy's chief tech, he was looking for electrical engineering students to help design a new room. We never designed the room. There were actually 3 slots. They had already selected the 3 students, but I heard about it after the fact. And I was in the science building. I stood outside of the door when I heard that somebody from Future Recording Studios was there at my school. So I waited and I told them, I said, this is my job. I have to have it. They kept telling me, no, we've already selected the 3 students. We don't have 4 slots. We only have 3. But you're persistent, so we'll give you a shot.
Wow.
They gave me a shot. The other 3 students did not last. And then I think it came down to 2 of us. He worked there or interned there maybe, I don't know, a month or 2 months. So I interned a full 6 months. And then after the 6 months, they hired me.
Wow.
I ended up working there for 5 years.
Wow.
So even while in college, I mean, I would leave school and I always worked the 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift at Future. But I would never get off at 2. I would sometimes get off at 6 in the morning.
Wow.
But everybody came to that studio. So when you mentioned Rolling Stones, we were working on a Rolling Stones remix, Prince remix.
Wow.
Patti LaBelle came to the studio, which was cool because she was like an auntie. And
You
that
already
year,
know, yeah.
yeah. And years later, when I saw her, and I saw her outside of either DARP or here at Patchwerk, and she remembered me. And
Really?
she told her assistant or manager or somebody, give her my phone number because she's always one of the good ones.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually love that because oftentimes we hear about, and I'm sure you've seen it, working in the business, how shady it can be, or how people may not always have your best interest at heart, especially if coming from like the artist standpoint. They may have gotten screwed over at some point, and then it's just like, well, the whole music business is shady, and I hate it, and I don't understand why it's like this. And you hear that story over and over. But me reading your story and some of the quotes that you have in like former interviews and just online, you've worked to always remain true to your own morals and values, but also to change that narrative that it doesn't have to be me trying to out you. I'm curious as to how you approach business with your clients and your artists through these different job roles, to where you ensure that you're not only looking out for the artist, but you're looking out for yourself too, because it could go either way. Um, but still maintaining like a business. How are you
Right.
able to do that? What's your business approach?
Well, I approach it with integrity. I always try to do the right thing for the artist. But now I have to think about myself as well, because over the years I never really focused on myself. It was always just about getting the job done.
Right.
I never thought about money, not one time. And I would say, oh, it'll work out. The money will come.
Hmm.
And the money came, but then sometimes the money didn't come. But I always felt that God would take care of me, and He has always taken care of me. And as far as the business being, shady and corrupt, it's funny that I'm even in this business, but I tell people, God protected me. He covered me because, I know people, things have happened to them that, it never happened to me. And I just thank God for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm no different. I'm not better than anybody else. I just think that,
You're covered.
God, yeah.
You're covered. Absolutely. You ended up working at Future Recording Studios for 5 years, and then why did you leave, or like why did you have to make another
I got
step?
fired.
You got fired? Why'd you get fired?
Which was crazy. And every time I see Teddy, you fired me, but I'm glad he did. Yeah.
It was
glad
just
he fired me.
time, or like what
Well,
was the
it was the craziest thing. I was friends with an amazing songwriter named Tammy Lucas. The song, Is It Good to You? And Heavy D did a version and she's singing the hook.
Oh,
And
that's
then
her?
That's her. She's amazing. She wrote Joy from Michael Jackson.
Oh, wow.
In fact, she's very instrumental in discovering the Neptunes.
Oh, wow.
Because back then...
She from Virginia too?
No, she's from Harlem.
Oh, okay.
She's from Harlem with Teddy. And so, Teddy brought everybody down, his whole crew, musicians,
Right.
everybody. They all came down to Virginia Beach. I don't know. I guess Teddy at the time had a beef with Tammy. And I don't know, it's just crazy. Somebody, Chauncey from Blackstreet, saw me at the mall with Tammy and told Teddy I was hanging out. I'm like, she's my friend. I don't
Right.
discuss business.
Right.
And back then, I didn't know that part of the business. I was working at the studio. So I wasn't discussing,
Things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I got
because
fired.
of that conflict, it was like, yeah, no, you got to go. Interesting. But that catapulted you to the next thing. So after leaving Future Recording Studios, when did you make a transition to Atlanta? Because I know you started working with Dallas Austin and so on and so forth, but what did you do after Future Recording Studios?
Okay, well, right after I got fired, I said, I got to do something, either move to New York, LA, or Atlanta. And I couldn't afford to live in New York or LA for that matter.
Right.
I had a friend here in Atlanta, so I moved to Atlanta. And the funny thing is, back then, everybody read the liner notes. So a friend of mine called me. He was working at Bosstown at the time, which was owned by, you already know, Bobby Brown, Stankonia. So he said, there are people here talking about Teddy's female engineer, Kim Smith. I was like, really? I mean, I never really, knew that people even knew me, knew my name. So when I moved to Atlanta, I mean, for the first 6 months, I was temping. I had a temp job. Um, but I would still go out and network and try to meet people in that music scene. There was a producer. He was one of the original founders of Trackmasters. A lot of people don't know him because he's behind the scenes, but he will always go to Future.
Mm-hmm.
He was here with his family, and I ended up calling him. He was working for Pebbles for Savvy. He was the A&R director there. And so when I told him, I said, hey, I need a job. He was also, producing
You
a lot
just
of
called him
records
up.
for. I called him and actually started attending some of the sessions. I would engineer some of the sessions.
How did you even end up starting to engineer? Like somebody was just like, we need some help. And you just like, okay, I'm gonna try to do it.
No, when I worked at Future, the chief tech, he ended up getting fired and he moved back to LA. But all of the engineers there, the lead engineers, they were wonderful. I got on the job training, and the thing about coming up during that time with Teddy Riley, I mean, Teddy is a legend. And when I tell you he's a genius and a perfectionist.
Mm-hmm.
So he would pull up a mix. I swear he would mix one song for a week, and then we would have to recall the mix. So, pull it back up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's done. He was like, no, I hear something else. So, I know it's just on the job training.
So, as an engineer, like, were you engineering sessions outside of his, or just like anytime? Like, whose sessions were you engineering? Just
Was
any of
just
your
there
clients?
at Future, but
Uh-huh.
then when I moved to Atlanta, I engineered with Alex Richburg. He was the
Gotcha.
producer at the time with Pebbles.
Gotcha.
He was A&R director, and so he actually resigned, and I was able to get his job. So I was
Wow.
A&R director for Savvy Records.
Dope. So at that point, you had already kind of inserted yourself in the fabric here in Atlanta. What was going on at the time? Like, what artists were you working with? Who were you connecting? I mean, because A&R, and that's my other question. Like, obviously A&R has changed today. Like, it's not necessarily you developing an artist all the time. I'm curious to know how it's changed in your opinion since you started with working with Pebbles and Savvy. And what does that even look like in 2019? Do you believe that it's still important to develop an artist as an A&R? Or even are labels even looking for you to come as a developed artist? Like, that it's not as much money being spent to like put in that.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm old school. I feel like artists should be developed, but nowadays there are some artists that come to you and they're ready.
Right.
Well, for the most part, they're ready. I know that the music industry is different. People are looking at the numbers and what they're doing on social media.
Mm-hmm.
But if I meet an artist, for example, there's one young lady, I think she's a star. She's amazing. But then I may have someone say, well, her numbers are low. She only has 5,000 followers on IG. I'm like, who cares? We can help her. Maybe part of the development is helping them build that fan engagement.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to, enhance what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's where, I mean, I sit down with A&Rs and executives all the time, and, some would agree that you should still develop the artist and that the social media doesn't matter. But then I sit and talk to people from labels and they're like, well, if you don't have any numbers, there's nothing we can do for you because the budget isn't there.
Yeah.
Versus how was it working with Pebbles? How was it working in that environment? And like just starting out, you never had an A&R job before. What was required of you?
Well, even though that was my first A&R job, but starting out with Teddy Riley, that was training in itself because he developed those records.
Mm-hmm.
He developed the artists. I mean, artists would come in and it wasn't necessarily his artist, but the process that he took to produce them, like, this is artist development. Because, hearing the finished product, I was like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the way it sounded, the first day they came in. But then working with Pebbles, she's amazing, amazing, amazing. And I can't stress it enough. She was a perfectionist, and everything had to be a certain way and look a certain way. And for her artists, she would do everything from, I mean, if they had to go to the dentist to get their teeth fixed, she would do that. That was, part of artist development. They would, have to see a dermatologist, pretty much the same steps that a lot of the LaFace artists would do. Perry was doing it, but Perry and LA, I mean, they were married at the time. So sometimes people would say, okay, well, Savvy was the sister label to LaFace.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got a chance to, learn what it takes to, well, how an artist really should be.
And what were some of those takeaways? Like, how did you? I'm curious to know, like, even just the environment, that space at the time, like, who some of those artists were, some of your like memories that really even proved to you that this is something that you could do long term, that this is like your job at this point, not something that you dreamed about at this point. It's like, I know for a fact that moving forward, I could do this for the rest of my life. I can be in the music industry and I can make money from this. I enjoy myself. Like, at what points did that become like memorable for you? And it really like changed your perspective even on music?
Well, that
It
started,
started at Teddy.
yeah,
With
it
Teddy.
started with Teddy,
Mm-hmm.
but then working with Savvy and Pebbles, it was different. She strived for excellence, and so did Teddy, but it was different. Um, with Savvy and LA, like I said, everything had to look a certain way. In fact, we would go to the office, and in the springtime, well, first of all, the staff was pretty much all female staff
Really?
except for her brother. He was the GM, and then I think somebody in accounting. But other than that, it was an all female staff. So
That's interesting.
yeah,
How did you enjoy working with the all-female staff?
it was actually, I loved it.
You loved it?
I loved it. I loved the birthdays. They're
Yeah.
like, oh my goodness, you're getting gifts.
Yeah.
We'd go to work, and all of us, especially during the springtime, she made sure we had flowers.
That's so nice.
And whenever we went to Studio La Coco, same thing. I mean, you had the best of the best. And so whenever we went, outside of work, we could go, I don't know, to any club in the city.
Yeah.
You're going to walk in for free just because you were affiliated or you work for Pebbles.
Right.
It's like, oh, it's one of them savvy girls. Let her let her in.
Let her in. Yeah. So I'm curious. I mean, you hear all the time about, and it's cool that you were able to work with the all women's team, but why do you think people often suggest that you have to have a woman on your team, and not only a woman, a Black woman on your team? I'm curious to know if you have the answer to that, because you worked with the all women's team, but also you have been the woman in certain spaces who are making things happen. And oftentimes we talk about when I talk to women, I enjoy it thoroughly, obviously, as a woman myself. But we often kind of focus on the negative, which is like, oh, you're the only woman in the space. But your perspective is completely different, having worked with an all women's team. But why was that advantageous for your client or the label?
To have a woman on
Yeah.
the team?
Yeah.
Well, we get it done. Even now, working with TIG, I mean, there's one other woman there. She's younger, but we really, make sure things get done. I think a lot of times women have the follow through. Not to say that you don't have thorough male executives. You do. You do, but women, we're more passionate. We're passionate about the artists. We care about them. So it's not just about, we're going to get it done, but we're going to make sure that the artist is taken care of.
That nurturing aspect too is always helpful, and moves the project forward, I think, too. Absolutely. So let's talk about some of your responsibilities. I mean, I know obviously you have gone on you consult with artists and producers. You've been able to work in the A&R space, but I think as a game, you're literally the general manager, as well as doing all those other things for clients. Let's talk about those responsibilities. And also, you've been there since the beginning. So how long has Think It's a Game been?
7 years.
7 years.
Yeah. Yep. 7 years.
So
7
what?
years.
So
And
you
I've been there for 6 years.
okay? And you got on and immediately went into a GM role, or like what did you start off doing with them?
No, well, actually, Dallas Austin.
Yeah, we got to
He-
rewind.
Okay.
Sorry, we got to rewind because I kind of did skip over that. First off, before we leave A&R, I wanted to talk about how you discovered, because you discovered Fantasia before American Idol.
Yeah.
How?
The funny thing is, my husband, he wasn't my husband back then.
Oh, okay.
He called me one day and we were just friends.
That's so interesting.
He's from North Carolina, and Tasia, that's what we called her. Tasia is from North Carolina. And it was right before I was planning to move to Minnesota.
What was in Minnesota?
Flight Time with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis.
Oh, wow.
So the producer, Alex Richburg, the
Right.
one from Trap Masters,
Right.
he was signed to Jimmy and Terry, and he kept saying, "We gotta do something together. I'm starting this production company." I talked to Terry. He said that we can, use a room here at Flight Time. And I mean, just to rewind a bit, when I worked at Savvy, our deal was with Perspective Records, which was owned by Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. Perspective had a deal with A&M Records, so we were, distributed by A&M, which was, I mean, that was my first time really knowing and learning what it takes to deliver an album. I mean, even though when I worked at Future, Teddy's manager at the time, Donna Roberts, she pulled me to the side and said, "I'm going to show you how to do all of these credits and these clearances for this first Blackstreet album." Because otherwise, I mean, I probably wouldn't have been as thorough as I was working with Pebbles.
Right.
But just the fact that,
You were
Teddy's manager,
prepared.
I was prepared.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And she pulled you aside to say, like, I want to show you how to do this.
yeah, because I was the only woman working at the studio. Well, other than Teddy's cousin, actually, she worked at the office, but on the studio side, I was the only woman.
Gotcha.
So his manager said, "You know what, let me show you some other things. Let me show you the business."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Shout out to her.
Yeah, yeah.
So before Minnesota, you were thinking about moving to Minnesota, or you did move there?
Well, I moved to Minnesota after I worked at DART. So, let me back up.
You have
I feel
done
like
so
I'm
many
trying-
things. I mean, like, this woman has said, I mean, just the list goes on and on. It's so hard to like touch on everything, but so DART, before DART.
Yep. So when I left Savvy, well, we all got laid off, and at that time, I said, "Okay, I have to really get out here and network and."
So is
just
this the
meet
second
people,
time
meet
you're getting
producers.
laid, or is the second time
Second
you're getting laid
time,
off?
well, the first time I got fired. The second time, LA and Pebbles, they got a divorce. And so for whatever reason, Perry decided to close the company. So we all lost our jobs. And I would, still do a lot of panels, network. I met a lot of producers in town. And in fact, Ian Burke introduced me to Monica Tanian. She was running Dallas Austin studio. And I ended up getting a job there as a production coordinator.
And what did that require of you? What does that mean?
I mean, pretty much the same thing I was doing, but, just doing the
Different.
credits, booking studio time, coordinating the actual production.
Got you.
So working at DARB, I think I worked there the first time around, maybe 6 or 7 years. I worked there for a while. I ended up working as joint venture manager. So
Right.
Dallas had a deal with Elektra Records, and I was the one person, I was the liaison between DARP and Rowdy and Elektra.
Mhm.
And same thing for our deal with Capitol. So, I don't know, got laid off again. Dallas closed the company. He closed DARP.
So
And-
let's talk about that for a second. Having to, because like I said, a big thing, a part of your story and many stories that we have here is that you've sustained yourself over the years in a business that is not always like straight and narrow. There's always some sort of the peaks and the valleys. Like, you just got to get through it. You having been laid off twice, fired once early on, how were you able to just kind of continue to what would you say? Obviously, you rely on your network because you pick up the phone and say, hey, and you're persistent to even get the job in the first place. So those are a few things that I've taken away from the conversation. But how else could you advise someone who may have gotten laid off? Because I think a lot of times you kind of sit in it for a second, like, dang, this happened again. I'm sure you were feeling it at the time. But what did you do to kind of persist and move forward?
Well, when I got laid off from Savvy, that was the first time, well, first and last time that I said, okay, I'm laid off. I don't have any money. I was working a temp job, but I mean, my whole life I've been always able to pay my bills, but there was one time that I couldn't pay it. And I vowed to myself that would never, ever happen again. So whether I'm working for DARP or wherever I'm working, I'm doing multiple things,
So multiple streams of income.
multiple streams of income. And sometimes people will say, even my husband will say, you're tight. You don't like to spend money. But I think because I got
Those
laid off,
experiences,
I'm like, I have to make sure I'm saving money.
Facts.
It's like, no, you're good. It's like, no, I want to make sure, I just can't, waste
Go out
money.
spending money. No, I feel you. I feel that. So just continuing to like make sure that you don't have all of your eggs in one basket, honestly.
Right.
Yeah. So after, or did you work directly like close to Dallas Austin, or like you did?
I did.
What would you say? Because I mean I know he was the one who suggested that you work with TIG.
Yep.
What would you say you like took away from working with someone like him, who's also legendary in this business and it has been able to sustain as well? What were some things that you learned from that particular experience, or from him specifically?
Well, one thing that I can say about Dallas, man, I love Dallas because he was one leader who he wasn't a micromanager. He would let you do your thing. And even if there was something that I had no idea what I was doing, he gave me an opportunity. And with working with Fly, Dallas told him, there's one lady you need on your team. She helped me, put my company together, even though DART was already functioning long before I worked there. But the fact that
He included you.
he included me.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, yeah, she can get it organized. And she's honest. You need somebody honest.
That's what I was going to ask you too. Like, why do you think people always reach out to Kim or to get the job done? Like, I mean, aside from your honesty, the type of person you are, like, speak to those, you can toot your horn a little bit on this part. I know you're really humble, but.
Well, I think it's because I am honest. I mean, even Fly says it now, and he'll say, well, I'll ask Kim. She's going to tell me the truth.
Right.
Even if it's something I don't want to tell him, if it's something that I know that I need to tell him, I might wait for a few minutes. Let me figure out how to tell him, because I'm going to tell him the truth. I'm not going to lie about it. So I think that's one thing, or one reason why producers or clients hire me. Yeah, it's because I'm honest. And I try to do it the right way. And I don't know everything. I mean, the music industry, I mean, it's faster now. I mean, some things I know, some things I don't know. And if it's something I don't know, I'm going to get the answer.
Absolutely. So being that you've worked with all of these like legendary people, who would you say have that even maybe like indirectly became your music mentor, or someone that you've looked to? Because I'm sure at this point you're somebody's music mentor. Hopefully you can be mine, because I mean, you seem like you have a wealth of knowledge that I could take away from as well. But I'm sure you ran into certain people that we've talked about and haven't talked about who have either directly or indirectly become music mentors for you.
Music mentors, I would say.
Or industry, just in general, entertainment.
Yeah, I would say, well, two people come to mind. Mm-hmm. The legendary Betty Wright, who I love. You know Betty Wright?
Yes, I know. I know who that is. I don't know her.
Okay. Definitely Betty Wright. She's like a mom. And also,
how did you?
Well, when I was working for Dallas the first time around, because I did two stints at Darb and Rowdy. The first time around, we were looking for a vocal coach in Miami because we had 2 artists based in Miami. Well, 3 artists, Sammy, JT Money, and Richard Lugo. So we were looking for a vocal coach to train in English and Spanish. And I always booked Circle House Studios in Miami. The manager there, Lourdes, she suggested that I call Betty Wright. And so when I called her, I was like, I mean, we talked for a while. I just got a good vibe from her, and I brought her up to Atlanta, and we just hit it off, and we became friends. We're friends to this day.
That's awesome.
But she has a wealth of knowledge, and a lot of people don't know that she vocal trains not only singers, but rappers too. In Miami, all the rappers go to her house. Khaled, Wayne, Snoop Dogg, everybody. Pharrell. I mean, she trains all these artists.
We've tried to speak to the importance of, public speakers and rappers, just artists in general, getting that vocal training, because it's not just because you're a singer that you need to be vocally trained. That's why I told you my voice not supposed to sound like this sometimes.
Okay.
I just, we all have to have that, especially, just talking and speaking. It helps. So shout out to Miss Betty.
I got to back up the Fantasia story. I kind of
we went around,
jumping all around.
We never really, that's what I was saying. We never really got back to that, how you were able to link up with her, or how you even discovered her.
A friend of mine, who's now my husband, called me and said, I got this artist. You got to see her. And you and Alex or Jimmy and Terry, y'all got to work with her. She's a star. So it was the day before I was
he
going
knew her from home. Okay.
Yep. He knows her from home, small towns. I mean, everybody is related. He's not related, but his cousin is related to her.
Gotcha.
So he dropped off a cassette tape with the demo. And you got to keep in mind, I work with Pebbles, so it was all about presentation. I called him. I said, what did you give me? I didn't even listen to it. The demo, the cassette, it just looked terrible.
That's important.
The picture, she was looking, well, it wasn't the best picture of her. So I didn't listen to it. I went to Minneapolis, and I think my 3rd or 4th day there, my husband's name is Jeff. He was also friends with Alex, and so he called Alex asking for feedback on the demo. He said, what demo? We never even listened. So I said, okay, I got it right here. We popped it in the cassette deck. And when I heard her, the demo was poor quality, but as soon as I heard her, I said, oh my goodness. I just felt something, just that indescribable thing when you just know the person is a star. Mm-hmm. As soon as I got back to Atlanta, that next day I flew to North Carolina. And she came to Atlanta. I used to record demos in my house, in my living room.
Wow.
Yep. And so she kept calling me saying, Kim, I'm ready to move. I got to leave North Carolina. So I said, okay, maybe I need to go to Minneapolis. Jimmy and Terry, they're giving us this room to use. Maybe I just need to go. I didn't want to move to Minneapolis.
Right.
It was too cold.
Right.
It was too cold, but it was an experience. So I got an apartment, and she moved with me.
Oh, wow.
And it was maybe 8 months prior to American Idol.
Wow.
And in fact, I knew she was going to win. Just going to she went to the audition on her own with her family, but I was there as additional support. And one of the producers, I would hear people talking, saying, oh, that girl is going to make it. We already know she's making it to the top 10.
Wow. I
just had a feeling she was going to win, too.
That's awesome. That's crazy. This is a cool story.
That's a cool story. And in fact, back then, I would call certain people, execs, about Tasia, and they all passed on her. They would say, oh, she doesn't have the right look. But then some of those same people, even producers, as soon as she won American Idol, I'm like, what? They produced songs for her. They didn't want to work with her before.
So crazy. And people, especially today, need to see some sort of social proof that other people believe in you before that they want to, actually invest in you, which is so strange to me.
Yeah.
If she's talented, she's talented.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sure you learned too in the business that it's not just about, it's about the presentation, which I'm happy you stressed about that tape, because we try to tell people that all the time here. Like, you can't just hand me a CD. It doesn't have your name, your contact
Right.
info. I don't know who you are. So the presentation is definitely important.
But even nowadays, I mean, just having your name nowadays is different because there's a producer that I've been trying to find for at least 5 years. He handed Rich Homie Quan a beat CD, and one of those songs was on Quan's tape. I still can't find him. I'm like, I have a check for him for royalty statement. I cannot find him. And Quan said, well, I was on the road and he gave me a CD with no name and phone number. I mean, how am I supposed to get in touch with him?
Wow. He ain't heard his beat?
I guess not. I mean, I searched and searched and searched.
Wow.
And that's one of the differences today than, back when I started. I mean, I wasn't, or still sometimes not used to producers just sending or emailing beats or buying beats online. I'm like, you bought this online for $30? Wait a minute. It doesn't make sense to me. I still haven't grasped that concept.
Yeah, we have that conversation often. I don't know. I guess it's just so many ways, so much accessibility, so many ways to make money, and everybody's trying to do it. So sometimes I think young producers especially just kind of throw themselves out there to just get that one opportunity. But then if you don't go get your money, is it really worth it?
Exactly.
That's
So
crazy.
some of the artists may have gotten beats online, and I guess online on those different sites, there's like an agreement or
Mhm.
blanket license.
Mhm.
I ended up, well, I had our attorney draft a contract that we could use just for that. So I said, we can't use whatever contract is on that website.
Mhm.
Mm-mm.
That's not enough.
It's not enough. So I have that one agreement that I use, but then they also have to sign a separate long form agreement.
Gotcha. To cover your behind.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And just to make sure my people are protected.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Did you have any personal aspirations in and outside of the music business that you haven't gotten to? Like, I know that with you, it seems like there's no ceiling. There's always more room to continue to grow, which is why you're still in this business and sustaining. So I'm curious to know if you have like aspirations outside of it or inside of the business that you haven't gotten to yet.
Well, inside the business, I would like to do more licensing for TV and film, which just over the past few years, I've been able to do more of
Awesome.
that with TIG and my own clients.
Awesome.
In fact, one of my producer clients just we got a placement on a trailer. We're in the movie and we got the trailer.
Congrats.
So I'm super excited
Do we
about
know
that.
We can't talk about what
I
it
don't
is.
want to say it
Okay,
yet
okay,
because
okay.
we haven't signed, but I'll let you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're definitely excited about that. And that particular music supervisor, we have a meeting with him. So I'm excited about that because I do want to have more relationships with music supervisors.
So is that how you go about getting into like the licensing space, just having those relationships with them, or is there another approach? Like, how did you meet him to begin with, or him or her to begin with?
Well, for this particular client, I mean, he's been in the industry for a while, and I mean, he likes to place records on artists, but just a few placements that he got early on the TV and film side. He was like, okay, I like this. And one thing that a music company told me last week, they said he's the one person that actually gets, he really gets it. He understands how to do tracks for TV and film, just because the beat is hot. And I mean, it's a hot beat. It may work for an artist. It may not necessarily work for a scene in a movie.
Absolutely.
So he gets that. He works quickly. And so for some of my other clients too, I'm just, focused on pitching more, whether it's to a music supervisor or sometimes music libraries, companies that own music libraries will call me. There are a couple of film studios that have that division, that music licensing division, and sometimes they'll work out a deal with an independent music producer or independent publisher to place music that's easily licensable.
Absolutely. And what about outside of entertainment music? I mean,
Oh my
you have a
goodness.
family.
Yeah.
You're able, I mean, you've already mentioned that you are attempting to balance that better.
Yeah. That part is hard.
Do you have any, I mean, I don't want to say regrets, but you've made a lot of sacrifices to do what you love to do every day, right? That being maybe not having children of your own. I'm curious to know, just even as a woman myself and getting older, like, do you ever think back like, dang, I wish I would have sacrificed something else for this? Or like, are you happy with the way that you made your moves personally, balancing your like personal and work life?
Yeah, and I'm happy with the way I made my moves, but my dad always wanted me to have kids. He would always say, I gotta have grandkids from you. So sometimes that does bother me. My husband, now he actually asked to date me back in the day. I missed it. When I tell you, I never thought about dating him, not one time.
It just didn't cross your mind.
Didn't cross my mind. And so he'll tell people sometimes, oh, she dissed me back in the day, or if we would have gotten together before you went to Minnesota, we'll probably have about 3-4 kids.
Right.
I just missed it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think as a young woman, just take the time to focus on that. If you want a family, take the time to do it, and you can have a family and a career.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can say being married is rewarding. I love being married.
Yes, absolutely.
Even though I was happy before I got married, but I'm like,
it's cool.
I never really thought about it back then. I was just working.
Yeah, but balancing that can be difficult too. Like you said, it's a 24/7 job.
Oh yeah, that's
most times.
tough. That's tough because all of my clients are men. I might have one female client, but the rest of them are men. And back in the day, they would always call me. They could call me anytime, and I'm going to answer the phone. But now, if they're calling too late, like one of my clients, he's on the West Coast now, he'll call and say, I'm trying to call before the cutoff time. And I never told him he had a cutoff.
But you just got to be respectful.
Yeah.
And the fact that, your clients respect you for that, I commend them for understanding.
Yeah, he's friends with my husband now, too. He said, I know it's a cutoff. So, before he moved to the West Coast, whenever he would travel to the West Coast, he'll say, okay, tell Jeff I'm in LA, so I get a grace period.
It's going to be a little later.
And my husband doesn't really trip. He understands what I do, but then I have to respect him as well, because I wouldn't want women calling him all times of the night.
Absolutely not. It's literally like, no. I feel that.
Who's calling you?
Who calling us? That's what you would say. Who calling us? No, this is great. I know we didn't touch on absolutely everything. Like one of the questions I do have, because you mentioned the Neptunes, you mentioned Pharrell, you mentioned you didn't mention Missy, but we know Missy, Timbaland, all these amazing people. You come from Virginia, so I want to know, like, what do you think is special about being from is it 757?
757. 757.
2 up, 2 down. Yeah, I know a little bit
Yeah,
about Virginia.
well, it was 804 back
804.
then. We expanded and got the 757.
Yes, so it is. Can you speak to what is special about the culture in Virginia? Like, why there's so many like great, successful people, especially in the music and entertainment space, that come from Virginia?
Well, people everywhere are talented, but I think with Virginia, even though it was the South, it was still close to New York.
Oh, true.
So you had, artists and producers from New York. They always came to Virginia, or if Timbaland or somebody wanted to go to New York, it was an easy drive.
That's true. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and I didn't work with Timbaland and Missy, but a friend of mine is actually cousins with Missy.
Oh, wow.
But then with Chad and Pharrell, and at the time it was Chad, Pharrell, and Mike Etheridge and Shay, the Neptunes. I mean, you knew back then that Pharrell was special. He was a visionary back then. And in fact, my friend Tammy Lucas, she taught him how to write.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And he didn't have a car, and I had a car. And so some days he would beg me, please give me a ride to Tammy's house. And sometimes I didn't feel like, I was like, I'm not taking you. We were fuss, but I will always take him.
Oh, that's so dope. So y'all were like, you linked up with him while you're in Virginia, while you were working at Future Studios. Is that where you met?
Yeah, yep, because Teddy actually used to host talent shows, and the Neptunes, Pharrell's high school was right next door to the studio,
Mhm.
right next door. And in fact, during their performance, it was Tammy Lucas. She championed the Neptunes. She kept saying, Teddy, you got to sign the Neptunes. And he signed them.
Wow.
And the rest is history.
That's
I mean,
fire.
Chad, Pharrell, they're dope.
Yeah, absolutely. To this day, like
Yep.
still continuing to do that. That's amazing. I love to hear it. Yeah.
And I know I was rambling.
No, you weren't. It was just, it's a lot to touch on. But I think we definitely got a piece of the story. We got to bring you back so we can hear more of like all the amazing things you're going to continue to do in this industry, in this space. And we thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thank you for your contributions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
No
you
problem.
for having me.
Of course.
And thank Curtis.
Absolutely. To just tell them like where they can find you on social media, where they can get in touch with you if you don't mind. And
Okay.
also, if you have anything coming up, I know you sat on the Grammy board, the Recording Academy for the Atlanta chapter. You do like a lot of amazing things within the space, and you're continuing to help like younger artists. So I want them to be able to reach out to you.
Yep. My Instagram is at KSmiles5, KSMILES.
Entire interview too.
And you know what? That name stuck. When I was working with Dallas, JT Money started calling me K Smiles. And to this day, Dallas and Jasper Cameron call me K Smiles.
I love that.
And so when I got the job with Fly and TIG for 2 years, they never even called me Kim. And so one day I had to say, my name is Kim. They all called me K Smiles.
I love that. So it's K Smiles. I'm sorry, say it one more time.
K Smiles 5. So KSMILES 5.
Lovely. And as always, thank you for tuning into the podcast. You can find us on social media at IDM Podcast, as well as myself at Sammy Approved on all social media platforms. Thank you,
All right.
Kim.
Thank you.
K Smiles.
Thanks.
Sonically superior.